All right, we'll start with our Daf Yomi sponsors for the month. Julian Tehillah Catcher, B'schus Refuah Shlema for Ephraim Ben Shifra. Today's Daf is not yet sponsored, so just for the month. Right? I have to make sure that I remember that today is Tuesday.
Correct.
And we are going to begin new parak Lamed Beis Amud Aleph, fourth parak Echad Dine Mamnis, the Echad Dine Nefashos. Whether we're dealing with, it is the same rule whether we're dealing with financial cases or we're dealing with capital cases. Bedrisha uvechakira. We're going to do investigations, two types of investigations. We're going to do the types of investigations called drisha, which are general questions about the circumstances of the surroundings, and then the chakira, which is going to be the more precise questions about when, who, what, and some of those detailed questions. Shenemar, how do I know that we're going to ask both those questions? Because the pasuk says, Mishpat echad yelochem. There is going to be one rule when it comes to the laws of judgment for the cases of financial and capital. However, having said that, we have many exceptions to that rule. What are the differences between capital cases and financial cases? The first one we know from the first parak. The first of all is that financial cases only require 3 judges. Capital cases require 23 judges. When it comes to financial cases, it does not matter how we start the case. We can start off the case by saying something positive, something negative against the defendant. It does not matter. V'dinei nefashos, when it comes to capital cases, we start off in saying something to the merit of the defendant, not something to obligate the defendant. Dinei mamnis matin al pi echod. As we said in the first parak, when it comes to financial matters, we do a straight vote. Right, simple majority. Whoever has whatever, it's a 2-1 in one way or the other way. Bein l'schus, bein l'chova. It does not matter whether you're obligating the defendant or you're saving the defendant. Either way, it's going to be a 2-1 case. V'dinei nefashos, when it comes to financial matters, matin al pi echad l'schus. We can find if we're going to be able to acquit the person, then a simple majority is enough. 12 to 11 would be sufficient. V'al pi shnayim l'chova, you need to have at least a 2-person majority when it comes to obligate the person. So a 13 to 10 based in, right? If we wound up in a situation where we had somebody who was abstaining from the case because they didn't know what the answers were, we add 2 more judges. So the possibility exists that it could be a 14 to 12 resolution of the case. But generally speaking, we're at least going to need 2 in favor. We have to have an extra, like we can call it a super majority, but whatever, is an extra majority in order to find somebody guilty. When it comes to financial matters, we're going to say that we are going to go back over the case again if we find additional information, as we discussed at the end of the last parak, whether it's going to obligate the person or it's going to acquit the person. Find out that the defendant doesn't have to pay or he did have to pay. We'll go back and we'll look at more evidence at any point. But dinei nefashos, when it comes to capital crimes, machzirin l'schus vein machzirin l'chova, we're only going to go back if the person was found guilty and now we want to try to acquit him, not if he was acquitted. Once he's acquitted, then we do not go back to the case again. We just leave it alone. When it comes to financial matters, anybody who's there, Rashi explains there are students that may be observing the case, they can all pitch in and say, hey, I've got an idea about why this person should be liable, why this person should be innocent. But dinei nefashos, when it comes to capital crimes, anybody can call out and give reasons why the person is innocent, but they cannot find additional reasons why the person should be guilty, right? Bottom line is, we don't want any help finding this person to be guilty. As we said, that the goal of the case, it seems we're putting extra emphasis on trying to help a person get off from a capital case if we can.
There's just one question. The judge that's abstaining.
Yes.
Can he change his mind after?
Yes.
He can change his mind.
Yes, I was unsure of it because there was a Rashi back when we first saw it that didn't sound like that, but from the Gemara that we had yesterday, it sounded like that the reason why we were adding 2 additional judges as opposed to 1 additional judge is because he might go back and now vote. And if he goes back and votes, then we will have an even based in again if we only add 1 additional person. So we add 2. So it seems to me that based on that statement, that means that the person can actually previously abstain and then change his mind and vote again. Dini mamonis, when it comes to financial matters, hamalamid chova malamid zchus. The person, if there's a judge who starts off by saying, "Oh, I think this guy's guilty," he can change his mind and say that he's innocent. Malamid zchus, malamid chova. Same thing the other way around. If he starts to say the guy's innocent, then he can change his mind and present arguments the other way. Dini nefashos, when it comes to capital cases, hamalamid chova malamid zchus. If a person starts off trying to find the guy guilty and then he changes his mind, he can start saying reasons why the person should be innocent of ahamalamid zchus. But if he started off arguing on the behalf of the side that he's innocent, ein yachol lachzor ulalamid chova, he cannot go back and start arguing the other way to say that he's guilty. So again, another protection. Dine mamonis donin bayom v'gomrin balayla. When it comes to financial cases, we can start the court case during the day, and if it goes into the night, we can finish up the court case at night. Dine nefashos, when it comes to capital crimes, donin bayom v'gomrin bayom. You can only judge the case during the day, and you have to have the final vote during the day as well. Dine mamonis, when it comes to financial cases, gomrin bo bayom. You can bein l'schus bein l'chova. You finish that case that day. Right, whether it's to find, say, that he's obligated or he's not obligated, the day you start the case, the day you finish the case.
Question: So what? 3 days before bar mitzvah, you call it Boba Yom. What's the meaning for that part?
Boba Yom means that's the day that you're bar mitzvah. Right, it's not 3 days before, but it's 3 days. It could be 3 days before you're actually reading on Shabbos, right? But Boba Yom means on that day. On that day.
Are there ever points where, like, let's say in what they're talking about, it'll go longer than a day? It won't actually.
It could, right? Theoretically, but this is the minimum amount. Right? This because we had cases where the judges might start the court case, and then during the court case, they'll say, "Well, we don't have all the witnesses here," so they can adjourn and then come back and bring more witnesses. That we saw that they could do, right? So you can definitely lengthen the court case longer, but this is the minimum, right? So on a financial case, it would be. Right, it's going to be the minimal amount you can finish the court case on that day. But dine nefashos gomrin bo bayom l'schus, you can judge that day to make the guy innocent. Ubayom shela acharav lechova, but you've got to wait till the next day to give everybody a chance to think overnight if you're going to find him guilty. Lefichach, therefore, in donim lo be'erev Shabbos, you cannot make a judgment on Friday. You can't start a court case on Friday. The lo be'erev Yom Tov or an erev Yom Tov. Why? Because if the fellow is found guilty and it's Shabbos, or is guilty and it's Yom Tov, you cannot carry out a death sentence.
But you
Also to kill somebody on Shabbos.
You can ban him from going to shul until after Shabbos. Then after Shabbos, you could do that.
Can't do it at night. Right? Can't do it at night. So it's got to be during the day. So therefore, we're not going to do it. We're going to avoid Friday cases. That's right. Correct. So now we're going to wait to force the guy. That's why you can't finish the case on Shabbos and then kill him on Sunday. So you can't kill him on Shabbos because you can't kill on Shabbos. Can't kill him on Sunday if you finish the case on Shabbos because psychological torture. Right? Yeah. That's called what do they call it? There's a word for it. I can't think of it. A nosbal din, something like that. I forgot what it's called. Anyway, it'll come to me after. So dine mamonis, when it comes to financial matters, hatmeos v'hataros, also cases where the court is being asked whether the person is tamei or tahor, maschilin min hagodol. So then, in order to give respect to the most senior judge, the senior judge gets to speak first. Okay.
Has there ever been a case where the victim sues the court?
Where the victim sues the court? Yeah. You can only sue the court if they judge your case wrong, right? We'll say suit means to go to the judge and say you owe me money because you judged the case wrong. That's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Yes, we're going to be talking about that issue. How financially liable could a court be if they make a mistake? That's one of the issues being talked about today. Now, dine nefashos, when it comes to capital crimes, maschilin min hatzad. So we're going to start from the side. They used to sit with the most important judge in the middle, and then second most to his right, then third most to his left, and go back that way. So that people who are all the way on the side were the lowest ranking, right? So, but on capital cases, you have to start with the smallest guy. Why? Because if the biggest guy goes first, nobody's going to want to disagree with him. As we're going to see, right, that the Pasuk tells us that you're not supposed to go against the Rav. So therefore, if he says he's guilty, then everybody else is going to guilty. Then that ruins the whole case. Huh? Like we saw with the king. Yeah. That's correct. So we're not going to let him go first. Exactly. Now, when it comes to financial matters, it doesn't seem to be as big a deal, right? So we let the person who's the head of the Beis Din go first out of respect. But when it comes to the capital cases, it seems, I guess, that they would not want to do that. Hakok Sherin Ladun Dini Mamonis. Anybody can be a valid judge for financial cases. Hakok Sherin Ladun Dini Nefashos, but not everybody can be a judge for capital cases. Ella, who can be Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim Hamaisian Likuna, and any Jew who has the proper lineage that they would be able to marry a Kohen, to the exclusion of, for example, a Mamzer, right, would be an example. Can't marry a Kohen, so therefore also, right, would not be able to. We'll see also whether they can marry a Kohen, they can marry Yisrael either. So we'll discuss that in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Dine Mamonus, Miba Inon Drisha v'Chakira. The first line of the Mishnah said that when it comes to financial matters and capital crimes, they're the same as much as we possibly can, and then gave a whole list of all the reasons they're different. But the first one, the way that they're the same is that we're going to do an investigation called Drisha and Chakira, this double investigation method. Is that true? Do we really need such a thing by both capital cases and financial cases?
Could be depending on how bad the case really is.
So Uraminu, here's our contradiction. Shtar shezmano kosav be'echad b'nisan. Let's say I've got a contract. Contract is written on it that the date of the contract is the 1st of Nisan b'shmita, during the Shemitah year. Right, that's the deal. What's a contract, a loan contract doing during Shemitah year? So Shemitah cancels all loans, but Shemitah cancels loans at the end of the Shemitah year. So this contract has basically got a shelf life of 6 months. Right, because by the time you get to the end, and the new year starts by Tishrei, so you're going to get from Nisan until Elul to be able to collect this loan. You've got 6 months.
Making approval also helps cancel.
You can get a prusbul in order to support it. That's correct. Yes, that's true too. Ubo edim, and witnesses come, the amru, and they say, Heichatem me'idim al shtar zeh. How could you have signed on this contract? V'halo biyom ploni imanu hayis b'mako ploni. You weren't in. This contract says that you were in Toronto, but we know that you were with us in Houston, where it's snowing today. So we were with us in Houston, and you couldn't have been there. You couldn't be signing this contract. So shtar kosher. So the contract is going to be valid anyway. The edav ksherin, and the witnesses are still kosher. We don't consider them to be liars, and they're not zomimim. Why? It sounds like a classic case of Edom Zomimim, because Chayshinon Shema Ichruhu Vikasvuhu. Because what we're concerned is they're right. They weren't really in that location in Toronto on the 1st of Nisan. However, what happened was they wrote a post-dated contract. Right? They really were later on. They were that day. They were in Houston, but they were writing about a loan that took place in Toronto, and they post-dated. They wrote the date later on. Okay, so now, now let's say that they were going to do these investigative questions for financial matters. How could you be in a situation where the Beis Din is basically saying, oh, you know what probably happened? It was probably that the loan was post-dated. Well, what do you mean probably? I'm sure you asked all the questions, right? You asked the questions. When was the loan? Where were you? What was the city? And asked all the questions. If you asked all the questions through Drisha Chakira, there should be no issue of having to suppose whether the contract was post-dated or not. Seems to be that based on the idea that we did not know whether this was a post-dated contract or not, we never asked, right? Therefore, the Beis Din comes along and supposes that this is the solution to the problem. Here you've got two witnesses that you were with them, but we've got a contract. The contract was probably post-dated. Okay, do you see the problem, right? So therefore you see that they didn't ask, they seem to not have asked the questions. But our Mishnah says they did ask the questions. Well, ulatamech, according to you though, according to that reason, tikshilach masnisin, shtar chov hamukdame. If that's the case, there's another Mishnah that you could be asking. Why pick a brisa? There's a Mishnah that also you can ask on it. Better to ask against a Mishnah because Mishnayos are more authoritative, as we have discussed. Shtari chov hamukdamin, psulin. If I've got a predated contract, those are puzzle. Those are no good. Why? Because we have learned that if you predate a contract, what you're going to do is you're going to be placing a mortgage on properties that I may have sold before the actual loan took place. And we don't want the mortgages to be on any properties that weren't in my possession by the time the loan took place, right? If I sold property on February 1st and then borrowed money on February 10th, so then there's no mortgage on that property. That guy who bought it from me has it free and clear. But if he predates the contract to January 15th, then it looks like I still owned that property at the time of the loan. So therefore, this property that I sold on February 1st is mortgaged, and therefore the person who comes collecting his debt might be able to come and collect that property that I sold on February 1st. That's illegal. Therefore, a predated contract is not valid. But a post-dated contract, that's fine. Why? Because there's no additional mortgages. In fact, worst case scenario is you're actually giving up on some of the mortgages you were entitled to. If I had the loan take place on February 1st and then I sold a piece of land on February 5th, there should be a mortgage on that. But since I post-dated the loan to February 10th, I lose my mortgage, but I'm okay with that, so then who cares, right? So therefore, post-dated contracts are fine. Now, if we're going to need to be able to investigate and find out when these contracts were actually written, mucharin amaik sherin. So how come post-dated contracts are going to be valid in that circumstance? Because at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, what we're going to wind up having is when we're going to ask them questions about their signing of this contract, they're going to admit that the information that's in this contract is not valid, is not correct. We're actually lying. The contract is a lie. We really saw a loan earlier. We saw it on a different day. We weren't in that, whatever they're going to say, and then that's going to contradict what's written in the contract and invalidate the contract. So how do you wind up presuming the post-dated contracts are valid? So that's a good question, but not as good as my Brisa question. That's why I chose the Brisa. Halo Kasha, to concern why did I pick the Brisa to ask the question on rather than the Mishnah is, Dadifa mina kamrinan. The Brisa case is actually a better question. Why is that? Dafilu echad benisan b'shmita. We're saying that we're even going to give credibility to the possibility it's a post-dated contract when the contract is post-dated to the 1st of Nisan during a Shemitah year. Why in the world would somebody do that? That's a really bad idea to post-date your contract. If you're going to post-date a normal contract, you might miss a mortgage. That's property that should be mortgaged to you. But if you post-date your contract and miss another month to collect during a Shemitah year, you're really cutting it close. That's risky. And so
If it's in the year, do you push it off to another year because you can't do it during the spring?
no, once the loan is canceled, it's canceled. You can never collect it, right?
The Shemitah year is already like a very difficult year for most people, no?
Yes, and the other problem is going to be that because there's no time to collect, people don't lend money. Because I've got 6 months to get it back, so the loans are rare, and so people are going to be suspicious of this contract. To date this contract like this is very suspicious, right? So there's nobody's making loans during that time. So you might think that there's no reason for us to suppose that it was post-dated, because a person wouldn't make his contract in such a negative sort of a circumstance. So afilu hachi, even still, we're saying kevan dishvius sofa mishametis. We're saying, nevertheless, at the end of the day, since the Shemitah doesn't cancel until the end of the year, machshiron, so we're going to allow that contract to be valid. Mikom makom, nevertheless, what we see here is kasha. That's indeed a problem. You're saying that. Our Mishnah is saying that you're supposed to ask these questions and find out the dates and when things are written, and this Brisa seems to imply that we're not. So. Fair question. So now,
They can write something saying that at the end of Shemitah, right?
They can write a principle, right? That was what Yehuda was saying. Yehuda was suggesting a principle to prevent it from being canceled. But you can only write a principle if you own land. You can write a principle that's under different specific circumstances. It's not so I guess the answer is we take it for granted. We do. Everybody does it, right? But yes, but you'd have to do that. So now we're going to have some answers to this question, right? Bottom line question is, why is it that our Mishnah says you do need Drisha v'Chakira? Why is it that the Brisa and that other Mishnah seem to say that you don't need Drisha v'Chakira? So how do you explain it? So we're going to have a few answers. Amar Rav Chanina, Rav Chanina's first answer.
Where are you?
We are 3, 2, 1 to a third line up from the bottom, 2 dots on Lamed Beis Amud Aleph.
Amar
Okay.
Rabbi Chanina.
Amar Rabbi Chanina, that's right.
Simon Charpash.
Yeah, Simon Charpash. We're going to see that the Ches Reish Pei Shin refer to the rabbis who are going to give each answers. Okay, Rabbi Chanina's first.
For example, on the
Yes.
last Gemara.
Sorry. Rabbi Chanina's first. So Chanina's first, Davar Torah from the Mita Oraisa, from the Torah, Dine Mominus Ve'echad Dine Mominus Ve'echad Dine Nefashos B'Drish V'Chakira. Really, Mita Oraisa, from a Torah law's perspective, you do have to ask the questions. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, Mishpat Echad Yelachem, like our Mishnah says, it's got to be the same laws as capital crimes. Umatam Amru Dine Mominus Lo Ba'in Adrish V'Chakira. However, the rabbis came along later on and said, you know what? Don't ask, right? Don't ask, and it is fine because we have this concept of sheva al tasa. Rabbis are allowed to not perform their active responsibility or mitzvah. We have this concept a few times already where we have a sheva al tasa. Just don't ask.
When they say don't ask, which means they don't really want to get into it, basically.
That's correct. Why not? Kadesh Lotino Delas Bifnei Lavin, because they were concerned that if the court starts asking questions of witnesses, you're going to invalidate certain witnesses. If you invalidate witnesses, people are going to stop lending money. That's bad for the economy. Right? You want money to be lent, therefore, don't make it so hard to get your money back. So therefore, they said, forget, don't ask. They just told the courts, don't ask, don't tell. Right? That's the right. That's the way it is. Sorry. Oh, okay. El me'ata, if that's true, great question. Ta'u lo yishalmu. So then, if that's the case, then what? Well, we had an issue that if the judges make a mistake, so then they have an obligation to repay for the mistake that they made. But the issue is that if you just removed the judge's ability to investigate the witnesses to help make sure that the case isn't fraudulent, so then why are you going to hold the judges responsible? So the answer is, Kol shekein shetino delos bifnei lavin. Then that's going to make it even worse. As Jonas says, the problem's going to be even worse. You're making it so that it becomes so difficult to get your money back because you're going to wind up with a circumstance that if the judges make a mistake, they're not liable. Well, now the whole court system becomes unreliable, and now nobody's going to lend any money. So you've got to create this balance.
What would happen in that case? Would, let's say, something like get thrown out? They'd have to retry, or how would it work?
Like if they found out that it was, that if they found out afterwards. So we've said, that's what our Mishnah says, that we can always go back and retry. We can always bring in new witnesses and retry the case, right? So now, Rava Amar, so that's the first answer. So that's the first. Now Rava's answer, right, is Ches Reish Peshin, right? The Reish is Rava. Rava comes along and he says, Masnisin dehacha bedine knossos. Our Mishnah is talking about not financial matters. It's talking about monetary fines related to, let's say, for example, somebody steals and he has to pay double. So those are monetary fines. Those monetary fines, you've got to do investigations. But the other Mishnahs are talking about behodos valvos. Right? They're talking about loans and repays.
It doesn't count as like you're not paying something
That's
back.
correct, exactly. So that's why therefore there's an extra level of investigation that we're going to do.
We just did this in Gittin.
There you go. Okay, Rav Papa, the pay in Charpash is Rav Papa. Rav Papa Amar Idi ve'idi behodavova. Both the Mishnah, his answer is both the Mishnah and the other Mishnahs are both talking about lens. Oh, I forgot to mention it. I turned the page. I'm on Lamed Beis on my base. Thank you. I'm going to, eventually, after several years, I'm going to get good at it.
You're gonna get it.
Okay. Kan bedin meruma, kan bedin she'eno meruma. It makes a difference if you're dealing with a fishy circumstance or not. The judge walks into this case and the guy looks shady. The circumstances are really weird. The guy's got a contract. It looks something's odd about it. Ask more questions. That's up to the judge's discretion. He's allowed to ask more questions. Our Mishnah is talking about ask more questions in that sort of circumstance. And the other Mishnah is talking about a guy walks in, he's got a contract, everything looks fine, nobody seems to be complaining about it, and all of a sudden new witnesses come in. Well, okay, but you had nothing to suspect. That is not a suspicious case. You don't need to do Drish V'Chakira. So, Kid Reish Lakish said, Reish Lakish, Rami Ksiv, Reish Lakish contrasted two different psukim. He said, B'tzedek tishpod amisecha, you should judge your cases with righteousness, your nation with righteousness. So, Ksiv, and then it says, Tzedek to your dof, you should doubly chase righteousness. So, Kate said, what's going on here? Kan b'din meruma, kan b'din she'eino meruma. How aggressive you need to be to pursue justice depends on how wacky the case is. When things look more suspicious, the judge steps it up a notch and he asks more questions. That's what you're supposed to do.
There's two kinds of cases.
That's right.
Tzedek.
So no, tzedek is the case where you've got to be more aggressive because it seems fishy, and but tzedek tishbot, one tzedek is when you can be more relaxed because the case seems normal, right? Regular basic guy walks in with a contract, everybody looks, yeah, it's contract, my contract, it's contract, so okay, great, we'll just sign off on the case, right? Something looks fishy, guy walks in, he goes, got no witnesses, guy comes in, he goes, I got 2 witnesses now, and I got 4 witnesses. Wait a second, time out. Let's start questioning these guys, right? That's what you gotta do. Ravashi, the shin in Charpash is Ravashi. That's not Charpa, but it's Charpash. The shin in Ravashi, Omar. Masnisin Kedeshaninon Kroi. The Mishnah is like Kedeshaninon, Kedeshanin Kroi. Echad Ledin, the Echad Lipshara. So, he says, unless he's explaining unless Rav is explaining Reish Lakish. No, that's also this, right. Rav Ashi is explaining. He's not the last answer. Rav Ashi is explaining another explanation for how Reish Lakish has contrasted those psukim. Reish Lakish had told us that B'tzedek Tishbot and then B'tzedek Tirdof. He says that it means Tzedek Tishbot you should judge with righteousness. That's talking about a regular court case. Tzedek Tirdof means to pursue righteousness, means to make what do you call it? Pshara, a compromise, right? That you should seek a compromise between the two. That sometimes a court case resolves in a case, and sometimes it resolves in a compromise. Times we're in a brisa. Tzedek tirdof. You should doubly chase righteousness. Echad ledin, the echad lipshara. Right. Sometimes that it can come for a judgment. Sometimes it can come from a compromise. Ketzad. How does it work? Shtei sfinos ovros benahar. Let's say you've got 2 ships passing on the river. Upagu zebazet, and they meet each other. Im ovros shtehen. If they are going to both try to pass at the same time, shtehen tovos, then they're both going to sink. They're going to crash into each other and sink. No good. Bazeh achar zeh. But if they're going to go one after the other, shtehen ovros, so then they're both going to get by. V'chein, a similar type of circumstance. Shnei gemalim shayu olim b'malos beis choron. You got 2 camels trying to get through the hills of beis choron. Upagu zebazat, and they encounter one another. Im alu shnehen, if they're both going to try to pass at the same time, shnehem noflin, they're going to fall. However, if they go one at a time, Shnei and Olin, then they're both going to get through. So, ha ketzad. So, what do? How do you solve that problem? So, sometimes it's a din. Te'una v'she'ena tuna. Take a look. One of them has a heavy load on it, and the other one does not. Tidcha she'ena tuna mipnei te'una. The one who has no load, the one who has the load has the right of way. Right? Let that one go first. Krova v'she'ena krova. If one person's closer to their city than the other one, so then, tidcha krova mipnei she'ena krova. Let the one that's further away go first. It's been on a longer journey. Maybe it's more tired. Let that one go first. Hayu shtei in krovos, shtei in rechokos. Let's say they're of the same distance, and there's no right of way here. Now we've got a pshara circumstance. Hatel pshara beinehen. They should make a deal, right? Make a compromise between the 2 of them. Umalos schar zulazu. Right? One guy will say, "I volunteer to go first." The other guy says, "Great, thank you. Here's $5 for your trouble." Right? And that's how they do it. Right? Make a compromise. Right?
Maybe you want to go first.
I guess this is the Panama Canal. Is that basically this is the
Yeah, maybe you want to go
right?
first.
Be able to get through.
Maybe you want to go first.
Yeah, well, I don't think they're investigating for the trap, so there's no traps. Tana Rabbanan. So they could do, but then I guess nobody wins, right? It's better if you say, well, I'm desperate to go first. How much is it worth to you? It's worth $5 to me. So then great, everybody wins, right? You got to go first, I got the $5. So then that's the nice way to do it, right? Tana Rabbanan, tzedek tirdof, right? You should doubly chase righteousness. Halach achar based in yafeh, right? That means that you should, another explanation of this pasuk means you should chase after a really good based in. Right? Don't go to like the cheapy based in, right? Go to a good one. Achar Rabbi Eliezer Lulud. For example, go to Rabbi Eliezer's based in Lud. He was very high quality. Achar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai Livrur Chayo. You can go to a place called Bur Chayo and you can have Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai give your court case a try. Tana. So we learned Kol Rechaim beborni shavua habein. If you hear the sound, loud sound of a granary of whatever they grinding wheat, then that is a sign that there is a bris. They were, because brises were prohibited during this. I think it's during the Roman era. And they couldn't make the announcements. So what they would do is they would put their grinders on high volume, and then people would hear about it, and that would be a signal to the town that there was a bris, and they could all come and they can all partake in the bris.
Where didn't the Roman Empire get suspicious about
The Romans did not know. Right? They weren't aware. If you were a regular Roman soldier hearing the granary going, that would not raise suspicion. Or haner beborur chayil, and this is why we're burning because we're talking about borur chayil. If you've got candles lighting up in borur chayil, mishtasham, there's a wedding going on there. Now, I had seen somebody actually say, I think it was actually in the bottom of the notes of the art scroll that this may be a source for the minhag to carry a candle at weddings.
Which one? By 10, 11? No, 18.
Right. Right, that carrying a candle at weddings may be partially coming from this. They were like candles, and when people would see candles during the daytime or excessive numbers of candles at night, so then
the reason why they read the Kahal and the chassid to the chuppah
with candles. That's what we're saying. Yep. Taner Rabbanan. Let's continue on. Tzedek tirdof halech achar chachamim liyeshiva. If you should doubly chase righteousness, meaning if you've got a court case, go to the yeshivas. That's where the yeshivas would double as courts because you got a lot of people who know Torah there. It's a good place to get your court cases judged. And we have a list of where all of the yeshivas were during those days. Achar Rabbi Eliezer LeLud, you can go to Rabbi Eliezer in Lud. Achar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai leVror Chayil. You can go to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai in Bror Chayil. Achar Rabbi Yeshua lePekin. You can go to Rabbi Yeshua in Pekin. Achar Rabbi Gamliel leYavne. You can go to Rabbi Gamliel in Yavne. Achar Rabbi Akiva leBnei Brak. You can go to Rabbi Akiva in Bnei Brak. Achar Rabbi Masya leRomi. You can go to Rome, and there you can find Rabbi Masya. Achar Rabbi Hananya ben Trajon leSichni. You go to Rabbi Hananya ben Trajon in Sichni. Achar Rabbi Yossi leTzipori. Achar Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira leNitzivin. And Achar, we're going to change it, not Rabbi Yeshua, because we said Rabbi Yeshua was already in Pekin. This is this is going to be Chanina ben Achi Rabbi Yeshua, and you can go to the Gola. He's in the diaspora, Pumbedisa. Achar Rabbi leBeis Sha'arim. And after Rebbe, you can go to Beis Sharim, and Achar Chachamim Lishkas Agazis. Go to the Chachamim. They were in the Sanhedrin chamber by the Beis Hamikdash.
Where was the diaspora, Rabbi?
He was in Pumbedisa.
Where is that?
Pumbedisa is one of the cities along the Tigris River in Babylonia.
Is it Pompeii? No.
No. That would be in Italy. Yeah.
Greece?
It would be in modern day Iraq.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Yep. That's where it is. Yep. Dini Mominus. Now, Dini Mominus Poskin. So now when we come to financial cases, you can start either positively or negatively. You don't have to worry about which direction you start the case from. When it comes to capital cases, you got to start by saying something positive. So, Heichi Amrinan, what do we say? Amar Rav Yehuda, Hachi Amrinan Lahu. If this is what happens. The witnesses come in and they start to testify, and when they're finished testifying, you say to them, Mi Yemar Kidikam Risu, who says you're right? By starting off challenging the witnesses, you're establishing on behalf of the defense. That is how you protect the defense in a capital case. Amar le Ula has, I have a problem with that. He says, V'ha chasmin lehu. You're going to wind up causing the witnesses to be unable to speak. Could you imagine? You bring the witnesses into the court case, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai looks at you and goes, "Who says you're right?" Immediately, he's like, "Forget it, I'm out of here." Right? So that's not a good way to do it. So he says, "V'lich simu." Well, what's the big deal? So you get the witnesses to stop talking. Milo Tanya. Now Rashi points out the witnesses have testified. You can't, there's a rule, once you've given testimony, you can't change your testimony. So what are we worried about? The witnesses will stop talking. They've already testified, they're done. Rashi says, Toch kedei dibur, if it's within the amount of time it takes to say Shalom Aleichem Rebbe, you can change what you said. So therefore, if this witness, if you tell him, who says you're right, he immediately backtracks, so then it could wind up removing his testimony. So that's what we're trying to avoid. Now, Velech Simu, who cares? We do other things that keep the witnesses from testifying comfortably. Milo Tanya, didn't we learn in Brisa? Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, Masiyan es ha'eda mimakom lemakom kadesh titarif daton. One of the tricks we do in order to be able to get the witnesses not to be able to testify against a person is we move them around from place to place. And by doing so, they get a little bit mixed up. and then because they're mixed up, they don't testify so clearly, and then we can catch them, and then we can throw their testimony out and protect people from getting found guilty. V'yachzru bahen, and they will change their mind. They'll say, "I'm confused. What's going on? I'm leaving." So now you see, it's the same thing. You just said we're not. What we see, we can do such a thing. What's the big deal? So mi dummy, is that similar? Hasa mi mela kamidchu. That we move them around, and then they decide on their own that they don't feel like testifying. They don't know. But hacha kadachin l'biyadayim. This is us actively taking an action to stop them from testifying. That we don't go. That far we don't go. It's the difference between doing it, making them uncomfortable, and going after them. Ella Amar Ula Hachi Amrinon. This is what Ula says, so this is what we say to them. Yesh lecha edim lahazimam, right? Are there other witnesses? We turn right as soon as they finish their testimony, we turn right to the defense and say, hey, do you have anybody who can make these guys edim zomamim? Yes.
How do they, do witnesses have to be sworn in? Do they have to swear to Hashem or something?
We said the first thing we do is ma'aimim. We make them all nervous. We bring them into a room on the side, and we threaten them. We tell them that crooked witnesses, everybody looks poorly upon them, and we make them feel really scared and nervous first. So we don't swear them in, but we make them very nervous and understand that they've got to take this very seriously, and that was the first step that we did. We'd seen that in the last parak. So now the witnesses that's true. So we're going to keep them from lying. That already took place.
Okay, so that's how we do it.
That's correct.
That's the only process.
Correct. We don't make them swear in a Sefer Torah or anything like that to say they're telling the truth, right? Amar le Rabba says, "V'chi poschin b'schuso shel zeh, she'ichovas shel zeh." Okay, wait a second. That means that you're starting the court case by saying, okay, we'll protect this guy, but we're going to make these witnesses into criminals. This whole court case could turn into finding these guys guilty. So that's not nice. The whole point was to find people not guilty, not to find new people guilty.
What's the punishment if you treat the witness like criminals?
There's no punishment, but we were saying if we treat them like we're trying our best to not make anybody guilty. So we don't want to make these witnesses into the new defendants.
That's also why that first step is just not on faith, but it's think good and it will be good. Just
correct. Yeah.
Telling the truth.
Mm-hmm. So now vehatnan. But wait a second. So what? Let's say the guy does have people who are going to contradict the testimony and make him zomimim. That's not a big deal. Why? Because Ratznan, we learn in Mishnah, when you find edim zomimim, right, there's a very small window that we actually punish edim zomimim. They testify. If we bring the edim zomimim after they testify, nothing happens to them. The witnesses are just thrown out. It has to be after the court case was finalized. The person was found guilty. Then the Edom Zomimim come. Then we're going to hold these Edom Zomimim liable. However, whatever they tried to do to the other person, right? We're going to give them the punishment whatever they tried to do to the other person. However, if after the court case was completed, then the fellow already received his punishment, then it's too late to make them Edom Zomim. So you've got this very small window between the conclusion of the court case and the giving of the punishment that we can actually do something about Edom Zomim. So who cares that this guy's got Edom Zomim? He's going to come and he's got Edom that can testify that he's got Zomim. He's not going to get punished anyway because they'll come during the court case. So the answer is no hachi amina. This is what I mean. Ilu shosik hai ad migmar dine umaisi Edom umezim lu havile chavoso shelzeh. Well, this guy, he has an ace in his sleeve, doesn't he? He knows that the two witnesses that just testified about him were with his two friends someplace else. So you know what he does? He tells his friends, don't come yet. Wait till they find me guilty. Then come and testify, because that's when we'll get these guys. So because we're worried about that happening, we don't bring up the issue of Edom Zomim at this point, right? Again, we're trying to find some way to open the court case nicely to protect people. So Ella, Amar Rabba says, Amrinanle, we say to him like this, Yesh lecha Edom lahachishan. Do you have any witnesses that can contradict these witnesses? That's what we say. Contradiction, if the witnesses contradict other witnesses, there's no punishment in that. It's just the witnesses all get thrown out. So they testify, then you turn to the defense and say, do you have anything to contradict? That's how we start with the defense case.
If you throughout the witnesses, you have to hire new ones?
You can't hire witnesses, right? Witnesses being hired makes them invalid, right?
You have to find new witnesses?
If you have to find new witnesses, if they exist. If they don't, then you're going to be stuck. So Rav, that's the first answer. Rav Kahana says, Mi divrechem nizdake ploni. So he says, the first thing the judges say, if that's what you guys are testifying, we'll get this guy off easy. That's how they start the court case. Okay, that's they have to say something. All they have to do is say something positive. Then Abaye v'Rava, Damri to Abaye and Rava, they say that what you say is Amrin Le. We say to him, Ilo katalt lo tidchal. He says. If you didn't, he says to him, don't worry, if you haven't killed anybody, you're not going to get found guilty. Right? You got nothing to worry about. That's the first thing they say. That's what they say. Okay, now, Rav Ashi says, Kol misha yodea lo zchus yavo v'yilmad alav. We make an announcement. Okay, anybody who's got a good claim against him, raise your hand now. Let's protect this guy, right? That's how you start the court case. All of those are ways to start the case in a positive way. Tanya Kavasi Abaye v'Rava. We have a brisa that supports Abaye and Rava's opinion that we say, if you're not guilty, you're going to be off. So Rabbi says, Im lo shachav ish osach ve'im lo satis. When it comes to a sota, right, the first thing that the Kohen says to this woman who's suspected of being an adulteress is she's about to drink this water, and she says, you know what? If you're innocent, you've got nothing to worry about. That's how he starts off, right? If you're guilty, you're in a lot of trouble. But if you're innocent, you got nothing to worry about. So, mikan sheposkim bedinin nefashos tchila l'zchus. That's where we know that when you start with when you start a capital case, that you're going to start with a positive. We are on Lamed Gimel to Amid Aleph. Dine Mamonis. Right? Dine Mamonis. When it comes to financial cases, Machzirin, when it comes to financial cases, we are going to we could double try the case, right? As you said, what happens if you find the guy guilty, not guilty? We can always bring everybody back in, add new evidence. Uraminu. But here's a contradiction. Dones Hadin, let's say they finish the case. Zikes Achayev, they made the wrong case. They made the wrong conclusion. Timei es a tahor, tihor es a tamei. They said that which was tahor was tamei, and vice versa. Masha asa osui. What was done is now done. It's too late. Vishalim mi beson. So now, since they can't reverse the case, the judge is financially liable and he must pay. He must pay the guy back because he messed up. So what's going on? Our Mishnah says you just bring new witnesses and keep trying the case and get the case until you get it right. Fix the case. So what is it? Can you reverse the case or can't you reverse the case? So Amar of Yosef lo kasha. So Rav Yosef says not a problem. If the guy is an expert judge, so then he has the authority to reverse and bring new witnesses in. He can, right? But if he's not an expert, so then he's judged the case. That's the end of the case, and he has to pay. That's
decides? He decides.
If he's an expert.
Is he an expert?
Right? If he's a mumcha, right? He's got the smicha from Beis Din. So, uben mumcha machzirit, is that true? That because you're an expert, you can now go back and rejudge the case? V'aktani, we learned in a Mishnah, im haya mumcha lebeis din potter milish shalem. If somebody was an expert from Beis Din, so he doesn't have to pay. That means he's financially, he has professional, professional liability insurance, right? So he's protected in that circumstance. But that doesn't mean the court case goes back. Summer of Nachman, Rav Nachman says, Kan sheish godol heimenu b'chachma u'b'minyan, kan shein godol heimenu b'chachma u'b'minyan. The answer is it depends. If you've got somebody who's greater in wisdom or in numbers, a bigger Beis Din, then you can go back and fix the case. If not, the court case is finished, it is complete, but the judge is indemnified from having to pay because he's a mumcha.
Who's reopening this case?
One of the litigants says, you judged me wrong. I got more witnesses that you didn't see.
So we're saying here that they go to a bigger...
They might go to that's what it seems like to me. Yeah, they're going to let's say they were in the local Beis Din, so now they go back, they're going to go up, they're going to, appeals court, right? They appeal the case to the higher court,
so
right?
It's not the same Beis Din.
I don't think so because he says it has to be Godol Menu, right?
Maybe one of them was...
Right, if somebody says, he says, even in a court case, he goes, even this person says, I made a mistake. Not every judge can do that. He needs to be able to have somebody who is larger. He needs to have somebody else, like an appeals court, come and look over the case and say, yeah, there was a mistake in this case, or there's new witnesses, let's reopen the case.
But not for capital, just for financial.
We said with capital we can do it also when it comes to, but only judging in his favor. Not judging against.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there two different Beis Dins, one for capital and one
yes. Right? Beis Din for financial is 3 people. Yeah. Beis Din for capital crimes are 23. Okay, Rav Sheshes Amar, Rav Sheshes says, Kan sheta b'davar Mishnah, kan sheta b'shikol hadas. Give you another answer, right? You know when you can reverse the case? The case is reversed if they make a mistake in something that's written right in a Mishnah. Elementary school kids could have gotten this case right. You messed it up, right? But if it's a case where there are two opinions and you could go either way, and the judge made a decision one way versus the other way, that does not get reopened. Damer of Sheshes, Rav Sheshes Amar Ravasi, Ta b'davar Mishnah chozer. If the mistake is something clear, like in a Mishnah, then we go back. Ta b'shikol hadas. If it's a mistake in something which can be the judge's judgment, so then Eino chozer, he does not go back.
Nothing is clear in the Mishnah anyway.
Amalei Ravina Ravashi. Ravina says to Ravashi, Afilu Tabe Rabbi Chia Rabbi Oshia. It doesn't have to be a Mishnah, even if it's Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Oshia, which are Morayim. Amalei he said, yeah, that's true too. In other words, once the case got decided, once the halacha got clarified, so then that's already something you shouldn't be making a mistake in. Afilu b'derav Shmuel, even if it's Rav and Shmuel, he says Amalei he says, yeah. Afilu b'didil b'didach, even you and me. Right, we're like just modern rabbis. Just even us. Once we've decided halacha, then that could reverse a case. Amar lei, he answered it back. Atu anan kitili kani ba'agma anan. What do you think we are? A bunch of reed cutters? We're like what? Like get no respect. Why reed cutters? Because reeds grow in the wild, right? And other normal crops, you have to plow and you have to plant and you have to harvest in order to be able to get them, right? Talmid Chacham is compared to somebody who plants and harvests, right? You invest, you put the work in.
Wheat, like wheat or
wheat, yeah. That's it, right. So you have to plant and harvest, and so you put the investment in, and then you get results. But reeds are wild. So what do you think we are? People who don't plan, whatever. We just take pulling ideas out of our heads, right? So anan hechi dami shikol. So he says bagmanan. So he says hechi dami shikol hadas. So then, what's the circumstance where we have a judge's decision that wouldn't be an example that wouldn't be so clear? So Amar Rav Papa could go trei tanoi or trei amoroi depligi hadadi. For example, you got an argument. Two tanoim are saying one way, three amoraim, they're going to say the two are moraim, two tanoim, two amoraim. It's an argument between two different people. Velo it mar hilchos lo kamar velo kamar. And they haven't decided. The halach is like this side or that side. Ve'ikri ve'avad kechad minayhu. And then the court says, okay, we picked this side. That's what seems right to us. Ve'sugi dishma say, azli ke'idach. But people in the world have already decided that the halach is not like that side. People are already following the other way. Hainu shikol hadas. That's a mistake in shikol hadas. That's what that means. Esrei Rav Hamnuna lo Rav Sheshes. Rav Hamnuna asked Rav Sheshes another question. Ma'aseh be'parasha nitla ha'im shel. There was a story. There was a cow whose uterus was removed. Ve'achila Rabbi Tarfon leklovim. Rabbi Tarfon said that makes the cow a treifa. And so therefore, I guess when they shechted it, they found that the uterus was missing, and they decided he ruled it to be a treifa, and with treif meat, you throw it to the dogs. So that's what he did. And the court case came before the Chamim in Yavne, ve'tirua. And they said, no, that's not a treifa. A uterus is not an organ that the animal cannot survive without. Why? Shamar Tudus Harofe. Tudus the doctor was one to say, Ein para v'chazira yotzis mi Alexander shel Mitzrayim. No cows or pigs would get exported from Egypt. They would what a spayed or neutered, whatever they would make it so that the animal, they would remove the uterus from the animal so they wouldn't be able to reproduce. Why? Because the Egyptians wanted the market on their cows and their pigs. So therefore they didn't want anybody to be able to breed their species of cows. So therefore if they sold them, you can buy it, but they would sell them so they could not reproduce. Okay, so that was what they did. That was their idea, right?
Copyright.
That's correct. Copyright. That's exactly right. They wrote the void stamp on the back of it, whatever. Right? Patented, right? Kadeshul Taled, right? That was the purpose. They shouldn't breed. So, if that was the standard practice of the Egyptians and Tudus the doctor verified that was what they were doing, it can't be a treifa because the animal lives a long time and it's a kosher animal. People are buying these obviously not the pigs for eating, but buying cows from Egypt and they're fine, they're kosher. So, Amar Tarfon, halcha chamorcha Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon said, there goes your donkey, Rabbi Tarfon. Why? Because he knew he's going to have to pay up. So Amar lo Rabbi Akiva says, Pater ata. He says, you're exempt. Why? Because you're a mumcha. Remember, you've got smicha. So since you're a mumcha, you don't have to pay. But you're right, the judgment stands because it's not a basic mistake. So you made a mistake, you'd have to pay. If you weren't a mumcha, you're a mumcha, so you don't have to pay. Well, now, if what you're saying is true, that the case gets reversed, well, this should be a circumstance where this was a mistake. It's literally written in a Mishnah. V'to b'davar Mishnah chozer, and that which is written in a Mishnah, the case gets reversed. Ve'od, and furthermore, ka'amar chada de toa b'davar Mishnah ata, v'to b'davar Mishnah chozer ve'od. So he says like this. He says what he was answering is it was a chada ve'od. What he was telling him is, Rabbi Akiva was saying to him, don't worry about it, you don't have to pay. For two reasons. Number one, because it's a davar, because it's a Mishnah. Since it's a Mishnah, the case is reversed, it's not your problem. Okay? But of course you already fed it to the dogs, so you can't do anything about that. But you don't have to pay. Second of all, you also don't have to pay because you're a mumcha. So he was giving him a chad of a ode. Here's a couple of reasons why you're not liable. So don't worry, your donkey is in good hands. Now we also know Rabbi Tarfon was very rich. So why does Rabbi Tarfon have to sell his donkey in order to be able to pay for this? The answer is because he wanted to voluntarily to sell his donkey, because he wanted to remember whenever he would go outside going, okay, time to load up the donkey and go to work. Oh, I don't have a donkey. What happened? I remember I made a mistake. I will never forget that halacha again. So he wanted to make sure that he did something to be able to, it was a reminder of him that he shouldn't forget this halacha. Inami, another answer is bishikal hadas ta'isa. That either or this was actually a mistake that wasn't in a Mishnah. This was a mistake that was subject to machlokas, and you made an error. And mumchel rab imata. So, and the only reason why you're not paying is because you are an expert. Because mumchel rab and patim l'shalim. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak l'Rava. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says to Rava, "My kamosiv Rav Hamnuna l'Rav Sheshas mipara." So, what's your question about this case? What was the question because of in the case of the cow? Para, but hare achila leklavim v'leisititi hader. He says, look, the dogs already ate the cow. Nobody was getting this cow back. There's no issue about whether the court case should be overturned or not overturned. It's too late. It's done. So hachi kamerli. This is what he's saying. Iyamart bishlama ta'a b'davar mishnah eno chozer. If you're going to say fine, if he made a mistake in a Mishnah case, it doesn't go back. So alma kamdina. So then you're going to say that the court case stands. Hinder de kamafkid Rabbi Tarfon. That's why Rabbi Tarfon was afraid, because then Rabbi Tarfon v'kamerle Rabbi Tarfon would be afraid because since the court case isn't reversed, now I have to pay from myself. V'kamerle ihu, and that's why the person was saying mumcha lebeistin ata v'ata patrim l'sham. You're a mumcha beistin. And you don't have to pay. Ella, however, if you're going to say that, like we were saying, that somebody makes a mistake in a Mishnah, the whole case is now reversed. That if the cow was around, so we would just return the cow, so the whole court case is invalid, and so nothing, you haven't actually done anything. So hashtanami lo klum avadet. So therefore, you also haven't done anything
I still don't
now.
understand this thing about mumche. That because he's a mumche,
Yes.
he doesn't have to worry about it.
I know.
It should be the opposite.
That's right. I thought so too. I was careful to understand because you're right. I would have thought that if I'm not a mumcha, then that means my court case can be reversed because I'm not an expert. So therefore, I should go back over it again. But what we're saying is that a mumcha gets extra authority that somebody who's not a mumcha does not have. So if somebody who is not a mumcha can't go back over, and a mumcha can, that means that a mumcha has more authority than somebody who is not a mumcha. That's how I'm understanding it. But you're right. I mean, so you'd think that your case was more final if you were a mumcha. Rav Chisda, Rav Chisda says, Kansha notol v'noson biyad. He says, I'll tell you what the difference was in the case of the cow. The case of the cow, he took the item and he gave it, he as a judge, he did more than just say the court case. He actually took the meat and threw it to the dogs. So in the other case, so therefore it makes a difference. When is the case non-reversible? This is the new answer to this problem. The case is non-reversible when the judge took the item and actively removed it and participated in the transfer. Now the case is final. But if he didn't actively do it, so then it can be reversed. So bishlo mechayev es hazakai. So okay, 1 second. How do you have a circumstance? I understand where the court case was, where the judge said you're liable, and he should have been not liable. So then it's very simple. Kigon shenoto v'nosan biyad. So I understand a simple case where he took the item. He says, great, you owe $100. I'm taking it from you. I'm handing it to you. That's very simple. Okay? But how do I tell the person, great, you're not liable to pay? So what am I taking? How do I physically transfer you're not paying? I can physically transfer you paying, but there's no such thing as physically transferring something that you're not paying. So the answer is, Da'amar potter ata. So he says, the answer is, once I say you're not liable, that's the exact same thing as taking the money, because I'm taking it basically from the person who's the plaintiff and giving it to the defendant by saying, you're not chayiv. I don't actually have to take it physically. Well, okay, 1 second. V'ha lo natal v'nosan biyad. So he says, but that there's nothing physical. You didn't take anything. So the answer is, Da'amar potter ata k'moshe natal v'nosan biyad. Since you said he's exempt, that's as though he said that he took it. That's as though he took it by hand.
But it doesn't work the other way. Like
Correct. When you're chayiv, you actually have to take it.
You have to take it with your hand.
Right. Right. Now, Ela Masnis in the Ketani. Now, let's take a look at our Mishnah quickly. The Mishnah says, Dini Mamonus Machzir and Bein L'Schus Bein L'Chova. When it comes to financial matters, so I can return we're going to go back to the court case whether he is liable or innocent. So Bishlam L'Schus Mishkachas. I understand the circumstance where he is innocent. Amar Le Mei Karachayev Ve'ata Velo Natal Velo Nasan Biyad. I understand what happened. He said, you're liable to pay, but the judge didn't take the item. Since he didn't take the item, the court case is still open, and he can always go back and bring more witnesses. El lechova hechi mishkachas law. But if you're going to say that first he said you are innocent, and now I want to switch it over to obligated, how can I do that? Because damer le potter, once I say you're exempt, so ata v'hamart, you said, kevan damer le potter ata k'moshe nasal v'natam biyad. Saying you're exempt is the same thing as me taking the money. So how do I have a circumstance which is parallel? I understand if I say you're obligated and I don't touch the money, so that's the case where I can go back and bring more witnesses. But if I'm just saying to you you're exempt,
What's lighter?
then what's the circumstance? So the answer is chada katani. The answer is it's really all one case. It's not two cases. It's not either obligated or exempt. It goes like this. Dini mamanis, when it comes to financial case, machzirin l'schus shehi chova. I can return the money to make you innocent, which is an obligation on the other person. Meaning, I said you're obligated. Okay, now we get new witnesses. Now you're not obligated. That means that you lost. Whichever way I go, I'm going to obligate somebody. So therefore, I can reverse a court case by saying you're obligated, because by saying you're obligated, I'm saying you're not. So somebody's winning and somebody's losing. Dekavase, now the question is, Dekavase gabi nefashos, machzirin l'schus, ve'ein machzirin l'chova. So 1 second, how are we going to interpret that when it comes to the capital cases? We're in Lamed Gimel Amud Beis. Machzir l'schus, so Machzirin l'schus, zchus gradasa. Vein machzirin l'chova, l'zchus shehi chova. So the answer is, I have to find, in a case where I'm saying somebody's innocent, right? And then by reversing the case, I'd make him guilty. But it has to be the same case. Where, how do I take a case where I say you're liable, and now I switch it to make you innocent, and then by doing so, I'm obligating somebody else. There's only one defendant in the case. I know that we're getting into a new situation, but it's already 9:30. Let's stop here. We're going to pick this up tomorrow, and we'll repeat it after. We'll repeat the basic bottom line of it, but we're not going to get to.
Oh yeah, one.
I don't know.